So, thank you very much. Before I start my talk, there is an important thing, which I have free Kinder chocolate for all of you. So take one and pass it on. This is part of my talk. You'll find out why later on. This talk is called Welcome Our New ES5 Overlords. Hello, I'm Mike. I'm a Node and front-end JavaScript developer in London. I work on stuff that kind of acts as the glue between GitHub and Amazon. And it's right now, the end of 2013, it's a good time to talk about ES5. Every current browser supports ES5. Every previous version of every browser supports ES5. In a couple of weeks, Internet Explorer 11 is going to come out, which means every browser before that still supports ES5. So maybe supporting IE8 which is the last ES3 only browser, is one of the requirements for your current project. But maybe for your next project, Node is obviously ES5, maybe for your next project, IE8 may no longer be a requirement. So you can do the stuff that can't be shimmed into all the browsers. So what do we think of when we think of ES5? Well, there's some new methods. We've got, array filter and reduce and all that kind of stuff. They're convenient, and we probably ignore them because we're using underscore. An underscore is great, but if we don't need to worry about shimming these things into all the browsers, our code will be shorter and a little bit more readable if we just use what's built into the language we all specialize in. But this isn't about that. This talk is about the magic in ES5 that maybe some of you haven't actually considered before. And I've got three things to show you. The first is, bump that down a bit, there we go. The first is some really basic JavaScript. So we're in Berlin, and Berlin is for music. So we're going to see some German bands. So we've got three awesome German bands. I'm going to iterate through them, really basic stuff. We're going to add a button. The button is going to go print a little message for us. There are two problems with this. Anyone from the crowd want to shout out what either of them are? That's in there, yeah. That wasn't actually what I was going for, but that is true. What's that? Yeah, exactly. So it's not entirely obvious what it was. But yeah, this doesn't work. There's two problems. Valeska from Boy is actually Swiss. She's not German. So yeah. The second one is when the loop is finished, as this gentleman over here was saying, band actually has the last value. And that's what the inner function sees. Therefore, it's always going to be stuck on the last band. So let's actually try that. I have yoink. Here's the code here. Just move that over because it's not quite so cropped. And we click on upper right, and it still says Craft Club. And we click on Boy, and it still says Craft Club. And when we click on Craft Club, it still says Craft Club. That's no good. So we could fix it. All right, so just to explain what the problem is. The problem is we can only see Craft Club, and we don't want to do that because Felix is a poser. So let's fix it. A common way, in the way that me and I think a lot of my colleagues would often fix this, is we just, we know JavaScript is a functional language, we want another scope. So we add a little iffy over here, and wrap the event listener in the iffy, and now band is updated properly. So it's a little bit of extra code, and so our second iteration, and Craft Club still works, and Boy now works, and Apparat works, and yay, it's all fixed. But hold on a second. The whole purpose of adding that iffy was to get another scope. Same thing in ES5 is only 8 lines of code. Why? Because the for each gives us another scope. And yeah, we also we can emit a whole bunch of statements from the start of the for loop. We don't need an index variable because we just want the value. We're not really concerned about the index. That's actually the difference between 12 lines of code and 8 lines of code. Now think about how many for loops you have in your app. if you're just iterating over an array, is there really any reason, if you really have to support ES5 or you can use ES5 shim, this is one of the things that is shimmable, the rest isn't. Is there any reason to be writing that rather than that? So my personal opinion is the standard functional for loop is a much nicer fit for JavaScript. And there's really no reason to be doing this big old long stuff in 2013. So it's a third less code by lines. It's a further reduction if you actually look at statements. It looks nice. Upright boy, graphical for each, function band. Like, really simple. Functions are a more natural fit. Cool. So that's good. Let's do this for more things. We iterate over strings and get the characters within them. We iterate over objects and look at the items. Maybe we could add this to more things, but hang on, that's extending inbuilt methods, which is horrible. And we've talked about this for years, and you shouldn't do it. So yeah, all right, let's talk about that. Let's have a quick history lesson. And when I talk about history, I mean probably 2 weeks ago. Chrome added the ES6 array find. Sugar.js had a fight with ES6 array find in Chrome. Sugar.js broke in Chrome everywhere. I've always liked the idea of Sugar.js. I've just avoided it precisely for that reason. So yes, it started with prototype, but it's still going on now, this kind of argument. So in ES3, there's a couple of reasons why we don't generally extend inbuilt methods in JavaScript, or why we haven't in the past. First is that whenever we add a method, here is a boring old-style method attached to object prototype, they appear in iteration. So we have some object which actually doesn't have any keys in it, but when we log each key, obviously the method is going to appear. Maybe not so obviously, but yeah, methods appear as keys in objects. It's annoying, and it's what you don't want. Now, there was a fix for this. Oh, actually, before I talk about that, do notice that objects still have methods on them in ES3. Each object has toString, for example, but you've never seen toString when you iterate over the keys in an object. Yeah, toString exists, it's native code. The things that are built into our environments don't actually appear in for loops. So the problem specifically is that added methods are always enumerable in ES3. They always appear in for loops. There was a fix to this. What the prototype guys say and what the the prototype guys said and what the sugar guys say is if the entire universe changes the way they do for loops to only iterate over properties that are on the objects rather than inherited from their parents, then this will be fixed, because you're not going to get anything from object prototype if you're iterating over just the things on an individual object. That is technically true, but oddly enough, the entire universe has not changed. So has own property is not an ideal fix. Extending prototypes in ES3 is risky because you will get libraries from other people, and they will just use standard for loops. Why? Because they don't want to make allowances for you. ES5 is a little bit different. This isn't shimmable, so you won't get it in ES5 shim. You can't fake it in IE8. Whatever there's object defined property. One of the things there is we have this enumerable false. When we actually create methods on prototypes, we can tell ES5 that method will never show up on that prototype. If we log the keys in the object, our new style method, which we've given it here, which is boring and empty, will never show up. That's cool. So the iteration issue is solved. If you don't have to support an ES3 browser, and you add prototypes, and you do it using object-defined property, specify enumerable equals false, and your regular old for loops will work just fine. But that's not the only problem with extending methods. People pick generic names. So string.prototype.namespace was a fight between jQuery and Sugar. array.prototype.find was a fight between Chrome and Sugar, and ES6 and Sugar. There was a whole bunch of other stuff with prototype before that. So why not pick generic names? Do you think the ES6 committee is about to turn around and start naming things after you or your company? Set a sensible prefix. So thinking about this and thinking right now there's a little bit of a hole in kind of the community here. We have two main common method extension mechanisms. We have underscore, where methods aren't actually on the object you expect, they're on an underscore. So it's not quite so pretty to look at. But it uses regular for loops, it's conflict-free, it's totally stable, it's got a great history. Sugar is really nice and pretty to look at, but they expect the whole universe to change their for loops, and they have a bad history. So keeping in mind that the ES5 gives us the ability to use define property and have non-enumerable methods, and that we could probably make some effort towards making prefixing better and perhaps be user selectable, I made something. It's only for ES5. Those other two libraries have to support IE8, so they can make compromises that I don't have to make. And its idea was lightweight Sugar. It's methods, regular for loops, it's conflict-free. It's actually been used in production at my old employer, Bazaar Voice, since early 2012. In the time, all the ES6 stuff that went into Chrome, etc., all the other stuff that's happened that has affected things like Sugar, 0 of those things have affected Agave. I'm going to do a quick little demo of that as well. So this is a really common, this is actually probably one of the first things I actually added to Agave. I do, as I said before, a lot of stuff that kind of sits between the GitHub API and the Amazon API. Has anyone used the Amazon API? Cool, AWS lib or the native one, or? Oh yeah. If you've looked at the API responses from Amazon, they are awful. I think they're actually converted XML. So you have like results, actual results nested under that, and then like items nested under that, and then like actual items nested under that. It is nasty. So sometimes REST APIs have a really contrived and long paths. Something useful's there, but finding it can totally suck, and that's a bummer. So for Reject.JS 2003, we've imported Agave and run enable with RJ. RJ for reject. We could have used reject. If this is a personal project, I probably would use RJ because it's nice and easy to type. If it's something I'm releasing to the wider world, I'm going to pick something longer to avoid conflicts. I'm probably going to pick like Reject.JS just to be more precise about it. Obviously, iterating works fine. We don't have anything from Agave appearing in our iteration, and you can see there that if we do look at the keys in our object, so object.keys will do the same thing, we have just the keys going down the left. Some REST APIs really suck, not looking at anyone but Amazon. But we can still run mock object, RJ get path. Get path being the method name, RJ being the prefix that we enable Agave with. Really long paths, that being a key name in that huge Amazon API response, and we'll actually get whatever was located underneath that key. This is way more readable and usable and having punctuation everywhere. If we are living in an ES5 only world, we don't have to make those compromises anymore. Yeah. But don't just take my word for it. I mean, there's two issues. There's the define property thing. There's generic namespaces. And there's some other little stuff as well. Some people don't like new methods appearing on objects because, hey, Window's an object and I've got, get path on window. Just deal with the fact that Window's an object and actually having get path on window can be useful. Yo.
How is that any better than mockobject.reading.long?
You'd have to check for their existence. So this is an API response. You can't guarantee that it's going to be shaped in any particular way. Yeah. Sorry, if that wasn't obvious. Yeah, Amazon also do some really interesting stuff as well, where the shape of what you will get back will change based on what you've called it. So other reasons. Well, I asked Brendan Ike about this. jQuery UK in a few months back, I said, hey, I live in an ES5 only world and I'm extending native objects using prefixes. What do you think about that? Because I wanted to get it from the horse's mouth. There's a lot of people talking about this. Brendan Ike is cool with that, and that's a link, and you can click that. Ember does it. Not a lot of people seem to realize this. Ember extends prototypes. They have different things for strings and array stuff. Ember extends prototypes by default, and you can deal without them. You can explicitly disable them. They prefer you not to do that. And they're actually a little bit less conservative than I am. They don't prefix things with Ember or anything. If ES6 or ES7 turns around and adds string prototype camelize, then Ember may be in trouble. But yeah, Ember does it. They're cautious about it, but I think a degree more caution is actually needed, hence the concept of prefixing. The final reason is that I just gave you a happy hippo, and I work with a lot of German people, and I understand that if you give somebody Kinder chocolate, we are now friends. So, thank you. The final thing I've got to show you is just a silly experiment. I probably wouldn't use this in production, but I wanted to see if this could be done, and apparently it can. It's an experiment in two parts. There's a data to DOM binding. I like Mustache, so there's this thing called Reactive that came out from the dudes at The Guardian maybe a month ago. It's just a data binding system that uses Mustache. If you understand Mustache, you understand Reactive. This dude's taking a photo. It's an awesome library. Check it out. Totally independent of this talk. I love Reactive. It's the simplest of any data binding system I've ever used. And I love Mustache, so therefore I love Reactive. But normally with Reactive, you have to kind of set stuff, and it's not live. So to add the live part, I've kind of subbed it in via object-defined property. And a little bit of other magic as well. This is actually just some basic stuff. We shove the data in like a little backup thing, just so we don't our getter function doesn't recursively get itself. It's not particularly interesting. It's an experiment. We also use a prototype chain injection, which is a clever thing that Kangax came up with. That's not ES5. It depends on Dunder Proto, but Dunder Proto is being standardized in the future, so maybe that's okay. Arrays are magical. If you want to do stuff when array length changes, the prototype chain injection is probably the neatest method I've seen. Oh, sorry. I should show you the little demo. So, over here, okay, so here's our we have a little live bind, and we just we attach our data to our demo binding. It's pretty boring. And then we're about to change some of our data. So right now it says, hello friend, you have 28 new messages, got a list of things to do in Berlin, drink lots of Club Mate, and meet friendly strangers. If I unpause the debugger, we're just going to update the data, but you'll see the DOM has already updated. It's just simply watching keys and updating and activating the binding when those keys change. There's a performance overhead to it. But yeah, you can see we can change keys. We can do push, and push works because of the clever array prototype injection stuff. Yeah, it works. So we can drink vodka mate, meet friendly strangers in the dark room at Berghain, and be cool and minimal cool with Richie Horton. Yeah. So the guts of my talk, and the kind of the message I want to put out, is that ES5 is coming. If your current project still needs to support IE8, maybe your next project won't. Your current project might come out in 2014. How many people will be using IE8 then? 2015, 2016. Think about the things you can't shim. So yeah, use ES5 methods directly. I love underscore, but JavaScript includes these things now, and it's simpler and more readable just to use them if you don't have to support those old browsers. Underscore's got a lot of other useful stuff. Definitely use that. But if you need, an array.sum, use array.sum. It's built into the language. Don't be scared to extend native prototypes. Understand what you're doing. But realize that ES5 gives you define property. You should always be using that. Your prototypes extensions should never be enumerable. And don't pick something that is likely to be used by anything else. I'm not pimping Agave. The reason I wrote it is because I wanted the ability to have a library and have allow people to pick their own prefix for extended methods. Experiment. There's fun, interesting stuff. Originally, when I saw object-defined property, I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be Java getters and setters that don't actually change any of the data and just fetch it, which I hate. You can do some cool stuff with defined property accessors and prototype change injection. Thank you very much. Enjoy the week.